hello today. Welcome to the Music Crypt. This is episode 5, and along with me for a ride, as usual, is my partner in crime, Dan Montgomery. How was your holiday season, Dan?
It was about the same as always. Pretty uneventful.
Oh, that well, at least you're still alive. That's the important thing.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have a show, right? Anyways, for people tuning in today, we're going to be talking the first half of the show about Black Sabbath's 1992 album Dehumanizer, which was the album where Ronnie James Dio came back after a decade of not being in the band. And second part of the show, we're going to talk about the history of SPIDERMAN. So getting right into it, Dan, I was kind of curious. What's the story of how you became a Black Sabbath fan? I mean, were you a fan of the original Sabbath with Ozzy? Did you become more of a fan when Ronnie joined? What's your story?
Well, it's kind of funny because the first album I ever got that was Black Sabbath was Heaven and Hell.
Interesting. That's kind of my story.
So, that was my first exposure to Black Sabbath. And then it was like it had to have been like a week later I went down to buy another Sabbath album.
Yeah.
And the only one they had left was Volume 4.
Wow. And now
so I took that home, put that on. I went, wow, this is totally different.
Yeah, and tell me, when you did so, you were probably thinking, oh, this must be the same singer on this album.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be the same guy. It's like, well, this isn't the same guy at all.
Yeah. and it's kind of unique because, of course, you got to have love for Ozzy because he's the original singer, and that's what the band was, originally. But I will tell you, very much like you, I was aware of who Sabbath was, but I wasn't a diehard fan. I became more of a fan like you when I heard, I believe the song was Neon Nights, for the first time on the radio. And yeah, I went out and bought Heaven and Hell. What was unique about it is a lot of people probably think because Ozzy Osbourne was the original singer, but he wrote all those great, Sabbath classics. But truth be told, it was Tony and Geezer wrote most of the stuff. And from what I understand, Geezer wrote most of the lyrics, and he was really like a diehard kind of science fiction guy, and a lot of those early Sabbath songs were based on his lyrics and stuff he was writing about.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I got a huge respect for Ronnie, because people forget when it was announced that Ozzy left the band or been let go and they're getting a new singer. Everybody at the time was like, oh, who are they going to get to replace Ozzy Osbourne? And of course they weren't the name guy, but what's unique about Ronnie James Dio is he didn't change who he was to join Sabbath or to try to sound like them. He kind of helped mold the Sabbath sound into what they would become with him. And he was a great songwriter himself, so there was really little need for Geezer Butler anymore to write the lyrics. And that's one of the things Ronnie is known for, his storytelling, his lyrics. I mean, he takes you on a journey. I mean, I believe, listening to his songs, I believe in demons and dungeons and wizards and dragons, Yeah. And so that's kind of my story. And now, Dehumanizer, you and I were, emailing back and forth and prepping for this a couple of weeks back, and we both kind of agreed. I'd simply just seen an ad about they were releasing it on vinyl or something. I thought, oh, yeah, that's a great album. You kind of comment, it's a very underrated album. It's kind of one of those albums people have forgotten about. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, for one thing, I didn't know this until researching this a couple days ago, but even after they got Ronnie back in the band and they're in the studio recording with him, it sounds like there were tensions early on because they tried to bring back the previous singer, Tony Martin. I don't think Ronnie knew about this at the time. They'd recorded some of these songs that would end up on Dehumanizer, and Tony Martin was like, "Hey guys, I'm in the process of recording my first solo album. I'm kind of busy doing that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you listen to the music, right? I mean, some people say this is one of their heaviest albums, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd say it's one of their heaviest albums, but lyrically and song-wise, I think it's an outstanding album. The only thing I don't really get into it is maybe the production.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's if you compare I only really consider there's 3 real Dio Sabbath albums, right?
Yeah.
You got Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, and Dehumanizer. The first 2 had this Sabbath groove to them. This feeling to it, and it seemed like in Dehumanizer it was missing.
I mean,
There's
yeah.
something missing from that entire album.
From what, yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, if you were to get, maybe it was just the guy who did the mixing and producing. You know, maybe if they gotten that complete team back, it would have been even better than it is.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder because the guy's name is slipping my mind right now. But I looked just on the Wikipedia a couple days ago, and the whoever the producer was, I never heard of a guy, some unknown guy.
Yeah, some German dude named Mac.
Yeah. Now you'd think that they would have maybe teamed up with somebody like Martin Birch, who was still alive at the time, who produced a lot of Sabbath stuff and Iron Maiden stuff, or they would have got somebody that had produced maybe Mob Rules or Heaven and Hell, like we were talking about, because those are those classic. I mean, what they wanted to do, I think, getting Ronnie back is okay. Maybe if we get Ronnie back, we can get some of our record sales up. People start coming to the shows again, and people hear Ronnie's come back. They think there's going to be kind of a return to that classic Sabbath sound. But I think what they're trying to do is trying to be modern, if you know what I mean. For example, I was reading a lot of the stuff they were writing.
Like when they did that the album right before this one, TYR.
Yeah.
That whole sound changed.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's the same sound, but trying to use Dio's voice, and the whole thing I think would have been. I mean, if they had stayed with the exact same, say, lyrics and music and everything, I think Tony Martin may have been a better choice at the as an end product.
Yeah.
At least the way that the records he was on was produced. You know, that's the only thing I have. Like the only downside I think about this whole album is just the sound.
See,
it's not really Sabbath.
Yeah. I mean, Ronnie.
I don't want to say this in a bad way, but it's more of a Dio solo album.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I was reading too to that effect where if you listen to once he left Sabbath again, like a year later, and he went back to Dio, the following Dio albums he made sounded a lot like Dehumanizer. And I think that's part of a reason they wanted to try to get Tony Martin back, because he's just a good little soldier, does what he's told, and Ronnie's not so much like that. He's like, no, I'm going to kind of steer the ship. And in fact, so much I was reading that Cozy Powell, the drummer that he'd worked with in Rainbow, was originally going to be the drummer on this, but then supposedly he fell off a horse and injured himself. I've heard stories, but that's kind of a story they came up with. I don't know how true that is. But once Cozy was out, he wanted to get Simon Wright, who had been his drummer in Dio and previously played in AC/DC, and Tony and Geezer were kind of like, no, let's get Vinny back, which in a way makes sense, because then you got that, the whole lineup from Mob Rules, kind of back together.
Right.
Yeah. And I think...
That was the same lineup they used when they were touring for
Heaven and
Hell, too.
Yeah.
I don't think Bill Ward hit the road with him on that.
No, he played on the album, but I guess he was in bad shape and was unable to tour in that. So that's when Vinny kind of came into the picture. And I think the thing with Dehumanizer is too, it was their attempt to try to be like a modern metal band in the sense that, for example, the song "Computer God," they were writing, I guess, about the evils of the internet and how people get obsessed with their computers and stuff. And instead of maybe like just letting Ronnie kind of do his thing and kind of write about demons and wizards and stuff, they were trying to compete with other modern rock bands at the time. Yeah, and then Time Machine, that was also featured in the movie Wayne's World, and that was getting like a ton of airplay at the time, like on the radio. But the problem I felt, as great as a song as that was, it didn't really fit with other songs on the album,
Right.
Yeah, and I think a lot of reason the album really failed to light a fire. I mean, people were excited for us that Ronnie's back in the band, but then it kind of went on a sour note at the very end of the tour.
When they were going to back up Ozzy.
And I can kind of
farewell tour, something like that.
Yeah, and I can kind of see Ronnie's point in the sense that, hey, wait a minute, so we're going to cancel our headlining show that we've had planned in LA on our big reunion tour to go open up for the guy who I replaced, and this is supposed to be our big reunion tour, and I'm just going to go out and we're going to just do a couple songs, and you guys are going to go out and play with your former singer. That kind of stinks,
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. And then I guess they were kind of shocked at how Ronnie kind of reacted. Oh, fine, then get somebody else. I'm not. And they got somebody else, and it's kind of interesting. They went with Rob Halford, who's not going to dig, going to a Sabbath show, and Ozzy's going to be there, and you're going to have Rob Halford filling in for Ronnie James Dio. So that was kind of that's kind of a choice that they can't really go wrong with, because I don't see people booing the metal god, for filling in.
Have you ever listened to the bootlegs from those shows?
No, I haven't really got a chance to do that. I have to do that later, but I'm assuming you have. So tell us what you.
They are freaking awesome.
Yeah, and
I could see them, if they were going to do another Sabbath album, and say around that time, they couldn't get Tony Martin and they couldn't get Ozzy. That would have been a perfect fit.
Yeah, see, that's what I have always kind of wondered about. I mean, I was kind of thinking, at that point, okay, to go back to Tony Martin, he's always been kind of a safe choice, when they need some, hey Tony, you want to come back? And then when, Ronnie or Ozzy want to come back into the picture, okay, see you later, So I agree at that point, especially Rob Halford was out of Judas Priest. I thought, that would have been time to kind of say, okay, it didn't work out with Ronnie. Let's try to do something with Rob, because even he had a solo career, but it did not really take off at that point. That would have been the time, and I think it would have really been amazing to see what that could have become,
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like when they did Born Again.
Yeah.
Went completely out there and got a vocalist that no one would have ever thought of.
Yeah.
But it was freaking an awesome choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because Born Again is one of those albums that people either love it or hate it, and a lot of people, without even listening to it, I mean, there's a controversy about the album cover, the demonic looking baby, and then they had all the Deep Sabbath jokes, but people forget too, in the 80s that Glenn Hughes was briefly in Black Sabbath. He never did an album, but he toured with them.
Right.
Yeah, and then I even heard also another guy that was briefly considered for Sabbath was Ron Keel, if you can even believe that.
Yeah. They were even checking out David Coverdale.
I could kind of see that, except for Coverdale's a little more bluesy than what you'd think Sabbath is, and that's the thing about when people point to Sabbath, they always talk about the Ozzy era or the Dio era, but what's interesting is a lot of people forget about the Tony Martin era. And I was talking to this singer, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, from Death Dealer, Sean Peck, and he shared with me that actually his introduction to Sabbath, I guess partly because of his age, was the Tony Martin years. He's like, I had no idea about Ozzy or Ronnie at that point until, I get, that's the point of Sabbath when I get into the band, and then I go back and I learn about these other two guys that were there before that. And the one album that everybody kind of points to as far as the Tony Martin era is the Headless Cross, and that does set, it kind of is a great album in the sense that it's got traces of classic Sabbath. They were kind of that's what Sabbath was doing at the time. They're kind of trying to stay modern, but it seemed to fit what they were doing at that time. But other albums kind of have gone forgotten about, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that was they did some good stuff, and I think if you go back and you count how many albums, who did what and stuff like that, I think Tony Martin had more time as a vocalist than Ozzy did.
Oh yeah. It's a shame, and I hear he's still he's working on a new solo album, so I'd be interested to see what that sounds like. But he's one of those guys that he's always kind of been there for Sabbath, like I said, when they need somebody. Hey, let's call our old friend Tony Martin. But that seems to be the case. But Dehumanizer, I think too, if it had been released at a different time, it might have caught more on. Like you said, if they had better songs, in the sense that a lot of these songs, like you said, were probably originally written for Tony Martin. So right there, Ronnie's like not too keen on why am I going to sing these songs that you wrote for some other guy,
Yeah.
And then I heard years ago that when he left the Sabbath the first time, after they did Mob Rules, they did that album Live Evil. It wasn't a great sounding live album, and then he had heard from other people within the Sabbath camp that Geezer and Tony would go back and mess with his vocals, and they changed the sound on the live album. And this has been an ongoing thing for years, or a conspiracy, or a belief that Ronnie James Dio had. And then so when you try to get 10 years later, when you go back and you try to get back with Sabbath, and then you hear these guys, they've written these songs, they're not getting along with you maybe in the studio, and behind your back they bring in their previous singer to see how he sounds. Probably you catch wind of this, so it's only natural. Eventually something's going to cause the friction, like for him to want to leave again, and it's sad that that's what it became to. But I'm glad, that then another 10 years goes by and they reunite, but then they have to call themselves Heaven and Hell, and even then I was like, we still, I know this is done for legal reasons, but we know it's Black Sabbath, really,
Yeah, exactly.
Because even they released that album, Black Sabbath, the Dio years, and that was when they were Heaven and Hell. So it's a way of getting around that, but kind of interesting. I seen them on that last Heaven and Hell tour, and it was amazing because Ronnie James Dio, he's this little tiny guy, and I'm sitting in the back of the outdoor arena, and powerhouse voice coming out of this little tiny guy. It really does look like a elf, but I mean he took, he was center stage, and all eyes were on him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember right when they hired Dio the first time, and of course Arden management and Ozzy and everybody was just talking crap about him, and Ozzy was saying that he was a midget and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So when I went to go see Ozzy, the Blizzard of Oz tour, one of the things he did at the beginning of the show is this little midget came out and he hung him.
Wow.
With a noose.
Wow.
And he said, "This is my friend Ronnie James."
Wow.
And then, of course, years and years later, after Dio dies, Ozzy has nothing but good things to say about him.
Of course, because once somebody dies, you kind of look like a you kind of look like a creep if you had anything bad to say about it. I mean, even to the point when Eddie Van Halen recently passed away, David Crosby, who's like an all-time classic rock artist from Crosby, Stills and Nash, he got a lot of backlash just for saying that he didn't know who Eddie Van Halen was. And then all of a sudden he's like, "Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." yeah. But it's just crazy, Dan, and I'm glad that they got back 10 years later after this Dehumanizer thing, and that Ronnie got to kind of finish his career out with Black Sabbath, and if there was ever any friction between him and Tony and Geezer, that they were able to kind of patch up their differences, because you could see when Ronnie was getting sick and then he finally died. I mean, Geezer and Tony, they put out their statements, and even Vinny Appice, who played with Ronnie over years, not just in Black Sabbath, but in Dio, you could tell how these guys were all affected by his death, and they had patched up their differences, and they almost felt like he was their brother,
Yeah, for sure.
And that was something they were not, faking just because the guy died. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then, even we got through all that time, we got to live through, like, right before he died, they would celebrate, like, the 30th anniversary of Heaven and Hell, and that's a pretty big thing because, the album's now 40 years old. But the thing is, 40 years ago when Ronnie James Dio, first joins up with Sabbath, they do that great album and tour, and what follows, 1980, unfortunately, John Lennon and John Bonham and Bon Scott all die, but we got those great classic albums too, AC/DC, Back in Black, just amazing stuff happened that year, and it all happened like 40 years ago. Yeah.
And I guess, you look back at that album, Heaven and Hell, not only, I think, in my personal opinion, is it one of the best Sabbath albums.
Yeah. But
it's got to be one of the top 10 albums you got to hear before you freaking die.
Yeah, in fact, I think it was called The Devil You Know, and I actually think they should have made an album more like that with Dehumanizer, and I think part of the reason they got back together, they said, "Okay, guys, we're going to make the album we should have done when we did Dehumanizer," for whatever reason, and I mean, and that really is their last statement with Ronnie James Dio, and what a statement to go out on. And I will say this about Ronnie, I think the guys knew, they were smart enough that Geezer and especially Geezer and Tony, they could have said, you know what, okay, unfortunately Ronnie's no longer here, but we're going to get our old pal Tony Martin. We'll get a new singer to come in, and we're going to carry on as Sabbath. That is, I think, smart enough to realize the fans would not have accepted that, and that's why, I think at that point, okay, let's get Ozzy back. Fans are kind of, okay, we can see that, we can kind of accept that, but to try to get a new guy in here and call it Sabbath is just, or even Heaven and Hell is not going to be the same thing.
Yeah. Well, they did cross purposes after that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, after Dehumanizer. Yeah. And I would say of all those albums they did with Tony Martin, that one, and probably the Headless Cross you're talking about, probably my two favorite albums. But if you go to all those albums they did with Tony Martin, there's some great players on those albums. We mentioned
for sure.
Cozy Powell, Neil Murray. He's this great bass player that played in Whitesnake, like on Slide It In and all their great 80s albums. So they had a lot of great players that kind of remained. And they had this guy, Jeff Nichols, on keyboards.
I think he did like every Black Sabbath album from like Heaven and Hell up to when they got back together with Ozzy and did 13.
Yeah, and I think before that, I forget which album it was, but they even had Rick Wakeman, if you can believe that, playing a couple of Sabbath albums as far as keyboards. Yes,
and it's pretty crazy some of the people they've had up here, like on that TYR album they had Brian May.
Yeah, and see, I mean, and they were supposed to, and then they were supposed to come out with an album like they did with the Dio years. They were going to come out with some kind of box set with the Tony Martin era albums. I guess they never did for whatever reason. But I think for any reason, if I was these guys, I would say, okay, these songs, these albums kind of gotten forgotten about, and the band's even kind of forgotten. Like when they got back with Ozzy, when they were doing the Dio stuff, which I get. You're not going to do that stuff, but they've kind of even forgotten about that era of their music, and I think it's a real shame. If anything, you could put like a box set out like they were planning to do at one time and say, don't forget these are great albums in our catalog too. They might get a little more sales that way. They don't seem, they're comfortable, if you know what I mean. So they don't have to worry about that. But it's a shame. Great music like that kind of gets forgotten about.
Yeah, I think it just depends on when the record companies want to make some more money.
Yeah. I mean that is so true.
It's like, it's been a while since we made some money off of Sabbath. Here, let's put out a box set.
Yeah. And I will say, before we move on to the next portion of the show, Dan, what I'd like to do now is, like you said, there's only a couple albums to do this with, but we're gonna we started last month with this thing where we were talking about the Ace Frehley solo albums, and we kind of ranked each of his solo albums. So we're gonna start calling this, I was saying, unless you have a better idea, calling it like the cryptic scale. And so I'll give you kind of my rankings, and then you can do yours. I would say probably like you. Number one Sabbath album to feature Ronnie James Dio for me would have to be Heaven and Hell. Number two, Mob Rules. Number three, Dehumanizer. And then there was the Live Evil album. And I'm not a big fan of that, only because... so I might rank that at maybe a 1 or 0, because... it doesn't have the sound like all those great classic live albums that we love, like, Peter Frampton Comes Alive, Kiss Alive, and the sound was kind of messed with, and so that's not one of my favorite ones. And like I said, those first two Sabbath albums, Heaven and Hell, I ranked that number one because that, like you, that's what introduced me to Ronnie James Dio and Black Sabbath, and I'll never forget hearing Heaven and Hell, Lady Evil, Neon Nights on the radio for the first time. Even see, that's the thing. Sabbath was considered a metal band, and not a hard rock band, not a classic rock band at that point. And when this album came out, they were even being played on mainstream radio here in Los Angeles, where I was from. And I actually got a chance to interview one of the guys, if you can believe it, from the Outlaws. And he was telling me that on that tour, the Outlaws was the opening act for Black Sabbath for several of those shows, and he said you would think that the crowd would just go wild having like a Southern rock band open for Black Sabbath, but he's like, those were some of the best shows we ever got to do.
Yeah, that was actually the tour I saw. I got to see the Outlaws and Sabbath together.
Well, I guess for a portion of a tour, but I don't know. But that's kind of interesting. I mean, that's just you would never think that a bands like that would tour together. And
yeah, it's a weird combination, that's for sure.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. When back then and in the '70s, you could have bands from different different forms of music playing. I mean, I remember seeing bills like with ZZ Top, Foghat, Aerosmith, and just some other crazy stuff. But that's the great thing about music back then. I mean, now people really want to just categorize everything. So, where would you put these albums on the scale as far as you're concerned?
I'm looking at, of course, Heaven and Hell as being the number one.
Yeah.
Mob Rules is second because it reminds me of as funny as it sounds, it reminds me of a Heaven and Hell Part 2.
Yeah.
If it has the same groove, has the same mix, has the same feeling. Even though they got like a completely different drummer to record, it still is.
Yeah.
It's still one of their best. And then, I'd have to probably say the 3 singles that they put on the compilation album. The Dio Years.
Yeah, you know what?
Put that probably above Dehumanizer.
You know what? I'm going to change mine, not because you did, but only because for a minute I forgot there was that Dio, the Dio Years album, and I would put that number 3, and then maybe Dehumanizer. And I'll tell you why. Because the Dio Years, for somebody that's like an average kind of fan, or maybe not too familiar with what Ronnie James Dio and Black Sabbath did, I would kind of point somebody in that direction and say, you know what? You want to really hear what Black Sabbath or Ronnie James Dio is, and you get 3 new great songs, go check out the Dio Years, and that'll kind of sum it up for you.
The only downside to the Dio Years is the remasters.
Oh, yeah.
And the remasters, at least in my opinion, I've never heard a remaster that sounds better than the original.
Yeah, and
even though I don't think Dehumanizer is a great sounding album, the remasters make it sound all the worse.
Yeah, wow.
But those three at the bottom aren't done the same way.
And now let me ask you, what do you think is the point of somebody remastering some? Is it because they really are trying to make the sound better, or do you think they're trying to cash in on, we'll repackage this?
Probably, I think it's probably more of cashing in.
Yeah.
Than it is trying to put out another vision of what the song should sound like.
Yeah. Now, what I don't dig that a lot of these record companies do, from one company, I used to love the stuff they would put out. They put out these great little albums from some of the favorite 80s artists, but there was this Warren album they did, for example, called it Latest and Greatest. They kind of they had to go and record new versions of their songs because the record company owned the owned the stuff, and it was how they could own the rights to their songs. And so they did that, and they recorded some new songs. But then the record company, which was I think Cleopatra Records, and not just this release, but several of their releases, they would go and they would re-release it with different artwork, so people would think they were getting a different album. Then you get home and you realize, wait a minute, I already got this in my collection. They just changed the artwork.
Yeah, they were tricky that way to try to cash in.
Yeah, and
but I think a lot of the remasters. Well, so far, I mean, I got a ton of music, right?
Yeah.
And I'll have originals, say vinyl rips.
Yeah.
And then I'll have remasters, and I'll have CD remasters, and then a re-release, and it's just the more you go to each time they put it out, a little, maybe it's compression, maybe it's every time they download it to change it, they're losing something, but, it's when they did the remasters on the Dio Years, I kind of think that, it's almost like they just grabbed the bass and turned it off.
Yeah, I mean, they did that with, they did that a few years ago with the Kiss album Destroyer, but they repackaged it. It looks kind of like the classic album, except instead of blue, they make it black. And one thing real obvious I noticed was they called it they called it Destroyer Resurrected. And one thing I noticed immediately was Peter Criss's drum sound was a lot louder. He sounded like a much better drummer than what he actually is. But that was one thing, that the drums were really a lot louder on that than the original. And it kind of, and then just to close this off, Dan, I wanted to ask you now, another album we mentioned throughout this was The Devil You Know, which was that final album they put out is Heaven and Hell. Now, my question to you, as a fan, do you think that we can include that in our little ranking system here because they called it Heaven and Hell? Because, like I said, I went about the album. I'm like, I know this is a Sabbath album, but they just had to call it this. But, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
If we're going to do that,
Yeah.
I'd throw that in at, probably number 3.
Oh, okay, yeah. So,
It still can't take out the top 2.
yeah.
You know, it's definitely a cool album.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's the last time you hear them all together. You know, I guess if you wanted to do it, you know, correctly, you could put the 3 singles before you put
Oh, yeah.
Heaven and Hell up, because from what I was checking out, when they got together to do those 3, they kind of said, hey, let's get together and do some more music.
Yeah, see, and initially that's what happened is they got together to put together the compilation, and then somebody got the idea, hey, why don't you guys go in the studio to see what you can come up with? And you know, we're digging this, and that's what was sad, because after they did the first Heaven and Hell album, they were going to go and get to work on a new album, but then Ronnie got sick, unfortunately, and they said that one thing about Ronnie was he was a workaholic, and they said probably, you know, the thing that didn't do him any good was he never went to a doctor, and so if he would have just gone to a doctor maybe a little earlier, could have been saved. Who knows? But that's just one of those things, and so I think we can, you know, in the Black Sabbath discussion now get into the history of Spider-Man. Spider-Man, I don't know about you, Dan, but he's on one of my all-time superheroes. I mean, when I started getting into comic books next to Batman and Superman, this was the guy for me, you know.
Yeah. I think it was probably my second comic book I ever got was a Spider-Man comic.
Yeah, and you know, and it's interesting because Spider-Man, okay, he hasn't been around all that long. I mean, 1962 is when he debuted in, you know, the comic book, and he's probably the one superhero they say who's been in the most different forms of media, like TV, cartoons, the movies, and then he goes from just having his own comic book to, you know, being included like in the Fantastic. In fact, I think he debuted in the Fantastic Four, from what I was reading. And part of the reason Stan Lee created this character is he wanted to come up with a comic book character, because at that time there was such a demand from the teenage audience for more superhero, more comic book. So he wanted to come up with a character that teenagers could kind of relate to. That's why Peter Parker, when he starts discovering his spidey senses and spidey power, and he gets bitten by the spider, that's why they made him a teenager, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, that just made him a little more, like, real, in a way.
Yeah.
And then plus all the superheroes back then were all adults, not like teenagers or sidekicks.
Yeah, and so it said his first appearance was Amazing Fantasy 15. Yeah, and again, we got to stop and think about, so Spider-Man was actually probably the newest this was 1962 that he premiered, and just think about that. Spider-Man is kind of premiering in the era of the hippies, you know, peace, love, and flower power. Yeah. And you know, doing research for this, one thing I never kind of knew about, which I think would be cool if they would like include this in an origin story, but like Peter Parker's parents, you know, Mary and Richard were killed in a plane crash.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's just something like, it's interesting because you never knew that, or that was never really explained in any of the movies or anything. Because a question I always had is, how did his parents die? You know.
Right. Well, then later, like when they wanted to keep the story going, they turned them into spies.
Yeah.
Which I thought was, I don't know. Sometimes, you know, that's the way comics go.
Yeah. Sometimes they just write that stuff too, like for the movies. But and so Peter Parker, from day one, he's kind of struggling with his identity, trying to deal with life without his parents. But and it's kind of and then when, you know, like by Spider-Man 3, you and I were talking about, when he comes to realize not only is he killed his best friend's dad, that's his arch enemy, then his friend finds out, hey, you're the guy that killed my dad, has to deal with that, ends up killing his friend. I mean, man, Spider-Man has some pretty heavy stuff to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's like, and then I think too, you know, when you're looking at Spider-Man, you know, besides trying to keep his identities quiet and keep his homework and grades up and still fight crime. He's got like the hugest, most diverse characters of evil that he has to fight.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's just you know, you got like like the number one guy, the Green Goblin.
Yeah.
You know, of course, that's kind of like DC's version of the Joker.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
guess that would be Marvel's version of the Joker. But yeah, it's kind of that same kind of insane personality and but a perfect bad guy.
Yeah, and you know, and the fact that the Green Goblin is really, you know, Norman Osborn, his best friend Harry's dad. I mean, when I seen that for the first time, kind of made me think, you know, it's true what they say. I mean, I realize we're talking about a comic book here, but you never really know. You know, the person you live right next door to, they could be, you know, this crazy guy that blows up the White House or something. And you're like, oh, he always seems like such a calm guy, you know?
I'm kind of expecting them to, you know, like at least in the movies anyway, I'm kind of expecting them to bring out the Hobgoblin.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean that is totally. See, and I use
that's kind of like the
second coming
incarnation of the Goblin. You know?
Yeah. See, and like in the comic book, I had trouble kind of understanding that till I seen the movie. That there's two different like you know, goblins, and it's kind of interesting that like Harry Goblin. Okay, I mean Harry Osborn. He realized, hey, wait a minute, Peter Parker is really Spider-Man. He killed my dad. I'm going to take over from where my dad left off, kind of type of thing, and you know, I'm going to avenge my dad's death. And then that's kind of a, I guess, moral or crazy thing. By the time you get to the end of Spider-Man 3, the movie, even after he's killed Harry, you know, Harry's lying there dying, and you know he's going to die. At that point, they kind of make up, you know, like when you want to make up with somebody, you just stab before they die, and it used to be your best friend. That's not really how the real world works, but he's like, oh, I've seen the error of my ways. I'm sorry, Peter. and then he dies, you know. But yeah, it's just Spider-Man 2. I think people can relate to because, I mean, from the get-go, Peter Parker is always kind of portrayed as this little, nerdy guy. And I mean, just over years, Spider-Man, went from nerdy New York high school kid to being a troubled, outgoing college student who was picked on by other guys to a married high school teacher to a freelance photographer. And in 2010, he joined the Avengers. So Spider-Man has had like a huge transformation over the years, since 1962.
Absolutely.
And
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then they have all those offshoots, it's like, like the Scarlet Spider and just all
Venom.
sorts of things that they came up with along the way.
Yeah, Venom, and I'll tell you, going back to Spider-Man 1, the movie, one thing that you kind of mentioned just recently, just a few minutes ago, was the fact that, very quickly we get in that movie, we get to see his identity. I mean, he just kind of takes off his mask and he's walking around so people can see him. Whereas, like in the comic books, I mean, it was a long time before we got to see Spider-Man without his mask on, and people were always trying to catch him and figure out who it was, and that's the thing that, like, as he kind of like we were talking about with Superman, you'd watch Superman on the TV or even in the movies or even the comic books, and especially like on the old George Reeves series, and he'd be winking and you're like, yeah, I'm Superman, or okay, I put my glasses on, so you're not supposed to know that Clark Kent and Superman are the same person. But like very much, that's why you could see they made Peter Parker a photographer. He's working at the Daily Bugle, and oh my God, how is it that Peter Parker's the one who always gets the pictures of Spider-Man? Oh my God! And then you learn, hey, he's Spider-Man. Yeah, and I think that's one thing that Hollywood has done great with some of these comic book movies is they always kind of mix it up with kind of comedy with serious stories that are somewhat. Now you were mentioning, which I never stopped and realized when we were talking about this back and forth. You're saying what killed it for you in Spider-Man 3 when he's listening to that kind of corny sounding.
Just do the song and dance thing.
Yeah. And you said like that just ruined it for me. Yeah.
They could have skipped that, and I would have really enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, and see, that's kind of an example of them trying to be funny, and maybe I don't know, maybe we just didn't get the joke, but or somebody told them that was funny.
Because Sam Raimi, he wasn't really known for comedy.
Yeah. And then I do think too that it's great, as much as I like Spider-Man 3, I kind of agree with you also in the sense that I like the villains that were in there, but I think it would have been better to just keep it to one villain.
One or two,
Yeah.
I mean, not just to say like the Avengers was the greatest freaking comic book movie, but they only had like one bad guy at a time.
Yeah, and I mean, not that I didn't like the villains, but see, I think what they were trying to do with Spider-Man 3 is kind of wrap it all. They wanted to make like a trilogy, which they did, and it's like, okay, we're gonna wrap it. We're gonna show, okay, Spider-Man 3. This is at the point where Harry's gonna get revenge on Peter for killing his dad. Peter kills his best friend, has to deal with that, and we're gonna have these other villains interact. Which, if it was a Justice League type, even Batman, where you got the Joker and Penguin, okay, and it's part of a storyline, but it just didn't make a whole lot of sense having all these different villains.
Yeah, exactly. What'll be cool though is when they do the Sinister Six.
Oh yeah, and
that should be a cool flip.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I gotta tell you too, going all the way back to when I was a kid. Besides in the comics, another place I saw Spider-Man for the first time. They used to have it. I don't even know who a guy was in it that played Spider-Man, but they used to have this thing called the Electric Company. They'd have these little Spider-Man episodes in each of those, and it was real campy. But I remember as a kid just loving it because saying, "Oh, Spider-Man, he's cool. He's on TV now."
Yeah. He's been in all sorts. Like you say, he's been in every media.
Yeah, and
if it could be done, it's probably been done.
And then I was reading Stan Lee was saying something to the effect that the thing too about Spider-Man is unlike Batman and even Superman, all these other superheroes that had like a mentor, somebody kind of show them the way. Spider-Man has always kind of been on his own, and
he had to figure it out.
And that's why it was kind of interesting when they have Spider-Man become an Avenger. I remember seeing that in the movie, and then he kind of right away becomes fast friends with Tony Stark and AKA Iron Man, and he shows him the way. And then and then in the last Avenger movie when Iron Man dies, you see how Spider-Man is really affected by that. Yeah. And so I think they've done a great job with Spider-Man as far as transforming him from one era to the next. One thing that I kind of see that maybe they had to kind of keep a different story going, but that I don't really dig was I like the movie, like the animated movie, like Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse, but I didn't get the point of having to have all these different Spider-Mans. Why don't you just stick with the one? I got like, okay, in Spider-Man 3, okay, I got the point of Venom, but I don't know that we need all these other Spider-Mans,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like when you have, I think I was telling you about, back when I was collecting comics, they had this story arc called the Clone Saga.
Yeah.
And that's when you find out that Peter Parker isn't really even the real Spider-Man.
Wow, yeah.
And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Well, what happened to the last 30 years?
Yeah, see, again, I guess that's the comic book company kind of getting creative with it, like having an aha moment just to kind of stay relevant.
And then when they get done with it, then like a couple of years later, then they just say, oh yeah, they never really happened. Peter Parker's still Spider-Man, and Ben Reilly is the Scarlet Spider.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because like at that point you're like, what do you mean he's not the real Spider? That's my Spider-Man. That's the Spider-Man I grew up with,
Yeah,
And
it was kind of messed up, but that definitely opened the door to all the weirdness of this multiverse thing,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't need like 20 different Spider-Man.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I could see them doing with that maybe one day is kind of ending it maybe where you have like a battle or a war among the mini Spider-Man and the ultimate Spider-Man wins, or the real Spider-Man beats them all. Yeah. But
yeah, it's just kind of weird. But comics are just
and
comics are weird.
And it's kind of crazy too, because even Superman, I got this animated film of Superman, like the Death of Superman from a few years ago, and you kind of like go into it. Okay, first of all, I'm watching this knowing Death of Superman, Superman dies finally. Oh my God! But by the end of the movie, everybody thinks he's dead, but he's coming back somehow, or he wasn't really dead. It's just something, like I said, to get people's kind of attention to. And I wanted to bring this up, Dan. Have nothing to do with Spider-Man, but kind of comic related. Is in 2 weeks on the 26th, they have this Batman Dragon thing coming out. It's an animated thing, goes directly to DVD, and it's kind of I seen a preview of it. It looks pretty groovy. It's kind of like the picture Bruce Wayne in the 70s disco era, what him and Batman would have been like.
Nice.
And
I might have to check that out.
Yeah, and again, it's like a place like when I heard that, I seen the preview for this, I'm like, man, I never would have thought about going there, but I'm glad they did. and that's the thing with these comic books, is because it is fantasy and it's not dealing with the real world. You can take the stories almost anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, last time we were talking about Superman, and I seen this other animated thing. They're talking about one of Superman's enemies was this guy, John Smith or something. It's from the screen, like alien guy that's from another planet, and while him and Superman are arch rivals or enemies, and Superman's a good guy. They can kind of relate because Superman knows what it's like to come from another planet and be judged.
Yeah, for sure, right?
Yeah, and I just never been able to understand like when they make some of these comic book movies, like why they have such trouble. Like we're talking about Batman too. Like they keep getting these different Batmans, and the guys they get to play them. Oh, I don't want to do Batman anymore. I want to move on. I want to be taken more as a serious actor and all this stuff. But these are big time movies, and I'm like, what are these guys thinking? And sadly, like Tobey Maguire, they wrapped up that Spider-Man, and he didn't want to do it for whatever. He hasn't been heard from since,
Right.
Yeah.
He just kind of vanished.
Yeah. It's kind of and it's interesting because Marvel. Cool thing about Marvel is now part of Disney. It is now like a Disney property. So I don't know if you've noticed, but like if you get the Disney Plus service, you get all kinds of stuff from Marvel, which is now a Disney property. I mean, you go on that platform, not only do you get all the great classic Disney movies and anything that's got the Disney name on it, but Marvel is now considered a Disney, so you get all these Marvel movies. You get all these great, there's stuff on there I never even was aware of, like they got a Marvel Superwoman cartoon. They got all this stuff that you can just not get anywhere else but on the Disney platform. And I think that's a sad thing about the current state we're living in, where everything's locked down. So, you think that like maybe eventually...
You're not going to get it anywhere else unless you subscribe to their service.
Yeah, in fact, if a movie theaters ever reopen, a lot of that stuff they want to just have on their platform and not even having the movies anymore.
Right.
It's amazing. So for Marvel, it's a great thing because if you're part of Disney, you're always going to have like a built-in audience. I mean, they already have a built-in audience for the Marvel universe, but you combine that with a company like Disney, and even if you say, okay, you're only going to be able to get that content on the Disney platform, how many people are going to buy a Disney platform just to have access to all that stuff?
Right.
And see, that's the thing that DC is missing. But I think where Marvel has done great, like movie-wise and the theaters and stuff up till this point, DC, what they seem to be very successful doing is having this stuff like on TV. Like we talked last time, they're going to have a new Superman series starting next month in February called Lois and Superman. It's kind of a modern take. I don't know who's going to be on it. They've had like Supergirl on for 5 or 6 years now, and I guess this is the last season. But if you watch any of those shows, like the Arrow, they try to and the Flash, they try to connect all this stuff. And and like what I don't understand about the Flash, that has been successful on TV. You'd think that they would do something with that and make like a Flash movie. haven't done it yet. I don't know why.
Right. Yeah, it's just kind of weird. It's like they get comfortable, or maybe they just don't think that the movie would do as well as, as much money as they make with like commercials and stuff on a TV show or something. Who knows?
But I'll tell you, The Flash is one of the more successful things they've done on TV because years ago, I was a kid, I don't even know who was doing it, but I remember they used to have this real campy version of The Flash. I think it was only one season on TV, and it was not as successful as what they're doing now, and I think they've seen what came before, and they really kind of they took it to the next level.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, that's about all I have to say today, Dan, unless you have anything else you'd like to add.
That's pretty much it, dude.
Okay, well, I'll be in touch, Dan, and we'll let you know what our ideas are for the next. I was thinking maybe next time, since I don't know how big of a Leslie West fan you are, because he just passed away, and
absolutely.
And I was thinking that we could do some kind of tribute to him, because if anything, even if you're not like a diehard Mountain fan, I mean, who hasn't heard Mississippi Queen? And we could just have a discussion on the fact that not even just that song, but people kind of debate. Was Mountain like a metal band? Were they hard rock? I mean, they had many different. I was listening actually to the first Leslie West album, Mountain, and man, some of the stuff he was doing on there really sounds like it was R&B and black music. So there was like a lot to what this guy was, did throughout his career. And I just end on this saying, I think it's a story that kind of needs to be talked about, because over the last couple of years, this guy was quite the inspiration. I mean, he suffered for years with diabetes. At one point, he had one of his legs cut off. He was still getting up on stage just like a year ago. And he'd play his guitar in the wheelchair, get up on stage. Just amazing. Yeah. So we'll talk more about the next show through the email. But thanks for doing this today, Dan. And I'll be talking to you again real soon. Thanks for everything.
Thanks, Jason.
Bye-bye.